Man, listen, the internet hasn't seen chaos like this in years. People woke up checking their phones like it was Christmas morning, only to realize they walked straight into a digital earthquake. Sometime around 2:47 a.m., a mysterious clip dropped. No watermark, no credits, no context, showing Chief Keef walking out of a studio with the exact same hoodie YoungBoy Never Broke Again was wearing earlier that night in Baton Rouge. That alone had fans buzzing. But then things went left with lightning speed, because moments later, OTF affiliates started posting back-to-back IG stories. Nothing direct, nothing confirmed, but the energy undeniably aimed at somebody. One wrote, "Funny how dudes switch teams when they feel safe." Another said, "I been knew he wasn't solid." And then someone else posted the dagger. "Don't act confused when we stop treating you like family." Fans were shocked. Screenshots went viral instantly. Twitter turned into a battlefield, and comment sections were so divided you'd think a presidential debate just dropped. But the craziest part, Chief Keef stayed silent for hours, letting the tension build, letting fans panic, letting bloggers foam at the mouth trying to decode the subliminals. Then at sunrise, he finally responded, not with a tweet, not with a video, but with a single audio clip that leaked from a private Discord server. In it, his voice is calm but cold, saying, "They said what they said, now I'ma say mine," and the whole internet lost it. Everyone's asking the same thing now. What really made OTF snap? What pushed Keef to reply? And how does YB fit into this explosion nobody saw coming? Because trust me, once the truth comes out, everything changes. The moment that leaked audio clip surfaced, everything in the culture shifted like somebody kicked open a door nobody was ready to walk through. Fans had already been arguing non-stop ever since that mysterious studio footage dropped, showing two of the most talked about names in rap standing in the same building on the same night, and rumors were hitting social media faster than people could refresh their feeds. But when the audio of Keef's calm, sharp voice saying, "They said what they said, now I'ma say mine," went viral, the internet erupted into a level of chaos even bloggers weren't prepared for. Theories spread like wildfire. Some fans swore his tone sounded hurt, others said he sounded bored, and a few insisted he sounded like a man who had been holding in frustration for years. And while all this digital madness unfolded, OTF affiliates continued posting subliminals, each more pointed than the last, adding layers to the mystery. One wrote, "Loyalty got a timestamp on it nowadays." Another said, "If you switch sides, stay there." Screenshots spread like smoke, and fans kept tagging Keef non-stop, waiting for the moment he would finally speak with his chest. Even people outside the rap scene jumped into the conversation, quoting old interviews, comparing old photos, drawing imaginary timelines on Twitter threads like detectives solving a cold case. But behind all the noise, behind all the think pieces and YouTube reactors screaming into microphones, the story that nobody saw was unfolding quietly in the background. Keef was in Atlanta, sitting in a dim studio room with nothing but blue LED lights, a half-finished track looping in the background, and 3 phones buzzing non-stop on the table in front of him. He wasn't angry, he wasn't panicked, he wasn't pacing the room. He was just sitting there, staring at a message that read, "You really linked with him?" That message didn't come from an OTF affiliate, or from a blogger, or from some fan. It came from someone he had once considered close, someone whose opinion carried enough weight to actually make him pause. And that pause added more fuel to the fire online, because every minute he didn't respond made people think the drama was boiling behind the scenes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Chice B's camp didn't help the situation. They started laughing on Instagram Live, joking around, not even addressing the situation directly. But fans interpreted every smile, every laugh, every offhand comment as something deeper. "They trolling OTF," some said. "Nah, they trolling Keef's old circle," others replied. "Nah, bro, they trolling everybody." But it wasn't trolling, not yet. Back in Chicago, OTF affiliates were dealing with their own internal storm. Some were genuinely upset, not because of the link up itself, but because of the timing. They felt blindsided. One of them even went live, pacing outside in a hoodie saying, "Man, it ain't even that serious, but it's the principle. You don't move without communication when the internet watching." Fans clipped that line instantly, turning it into memes, edits, and dramatic breakdown videos. But the truth was this: nobody knew what conversations happened privately. Nobody Nobody knew who talked to whom. Nobody knew what expectations existed behind the scenes. The public was only reacting to the surface, while the deeper emotional undercurrents ran way below visibility. Add to that the long, complicated history of the Chicago scene, and people started projecting years of narratives onto one blurry piece of footage. By noon, drama channels had already uploaded 20 videos with titles like Keef finally responds, and OTF goes off after studio footage, and YB laughing at the beef. Every video had tens of thousands of views, comments full of "this is crazy" and 2026 already wild, and if this turns into a collab, I'm losing it. But while fans argued publicly, privately, Keef finally called someone he trusted, an older friend, someone who had been around long before fame, someone who never cared about blogs or comments. As soon as the friend picked up, they didn't even say hello. They said, "So you really did a song with him?" Keef sighed, leaned back in his chair, and replied, "Ain't no song. People jumping to conclusions off a hallway clip." His friend hesitated. You know how they are. They think everything means something. And the timing? Bro, the timing looks messy. Keef rubbed his forehead and said, "I ain't finna shape my life around what the internet thinks messy." But even though he said that, even though he meant it, the moment he hung up the phone, he stared at the ceiling with this expression. Not anger, not sadness, but a kind of tiredness that comes from being misunderstood for so long. And that emotion, fans actually sensed it. They began tweeting things like, "Keef looked like he tired of the fake narratives," and "this ain't beef, this miscommunication." Meanwhile, inside OTF circles, tension kept bubbling. One affiliate sent a voice note to a friend saying, "I ain't mad at him working with folks. I'm mad we found out the same time the internet did." Another said if it was love, he would have said something beforehand. But not everybody was upset. Some OTF members told fans to chill out, saying, "It's music, y'all turning it into war." However, the louder voices drowned out the calmer ones, and those louder voices traveled across platforms, becoming the dominant narrative. People started digging up old clips of Keef smiling with OTF members, old comment sections full of big bro, lil bro interactions, old interview moments where they showed nothing but respect, and those nostalgic clips only made the situation feel heavier, like a friendship stretching thin under the pressure of the internet. Meanwhile, YB's fanbase kept stirring the pot unintentionally. Someone posted a clip of YB in the studio yelling, "We up this year," and fans twisted it into, he talking about linking with Keef. Another fan made an edit of Keef and YB with dramatic music captioned, "New duo incoming." That edit alone caused 40,000 comments of pure chaos. But while all this noise kept getting louder, Keef finally stood up from the studio couch, walked into the hallway, and said quietly to his engineer, "Cut the beat off for a second." The engineer turned toward him, confused, and Keef looked him dead in the eyes and said, "They think I'm moving weird. They think I'm choosing sides, but all I did was walk into a building." The engineer nodded slowly, sensing how deeply the situation was hitting him. "You want to say something online?" Keef shook his head. Not yet, but the truth was he wouldn't stay quiet for long. Something was building inside him, frustration, loyalty, disappointment, clarity, and all of it was about to spill over in a way nobody expected. By the time the sun started setting, the situation had already spiraled into something none of the artists ever asked for, something entirely created and inflated by fans, bloggers, and algorithm-hungry pages desperate for a viral moment. What began as a blurry clip of two artists in the same building had now become a full-blown internet war, with people creating theories so detailed you'd think they were writing movie scripts. And while the world kept blowing things out of proportion, Keef was sitting in the same Atlanta studio scrolling through comments with this blank, unreadable expression on his face. Some comments accused him of switching up, some defended him fiercely, and some said the whole thing was overhyped. But the comment that froze him was one that simply said, "Damn, I thought they were family." That one hit different, not because it was true or false, but because the idea of family in the industry had been stretched, twisted, misinterpreted for years. People who were only close publicly were labeled brothers, and people who rarely spoke were accused of betrayal. In reality, relationships changed, grew apart, reconnected, drifted, yet just like anyone else's life, only magnified by millions of spectators. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the tension wasn't anger anymore. It was confusion. A few OTF affiliates started questioning whether they had reacted too quickly. Screenshots leaked from private conversations where people were texting each other things like, "Bro, maybe we jumped the gun," and "He ain't say nothing disrespectful. Why we assume the worst?" But at the same time, other voices kept fanning the flames. One affiliate went live again, saying, "If it wasn't shady, why didn't he just say something? Why we finding out from TikTok?" His frustration wasn't rage, it was disappointment. And that disappointment spread like wildfire, becoming the loudest narrative even when quieter voices tried to cool things down. Back in Atlanta, Ian, one of Keef's close friends, walked into the studio and tossed his phone onto the couch, saying, "Aye, bro, you seen what they saying now?" Keef didn't answer immediately. He just exhaled slowly, then said, "Yeah, I seen it." His friend shook his head, pacing. "They acting like you signed a lifelong contract with them, like you can't breathe without permission." Keef finally stood up and replied, "People gonna believe whatever makes them feel like they in the story." That line captured exactly how he felt. Not angry, not guilty, but tired of being placed at the center of narratives he didn't write. At the same time, down south, YB's circle was cracking jokes, not about the situation, but about the internet itself. One of his crew members said, "These fans be creating beef out of shadows." Someone else laughed and added, they think everybody hate each other. Meanwhile, folks just working." It wasn't disrespect, it was disbelief at how fast the internet could create a feud out of nothing. And yet, even though YB wasn't taking it seriously, some people online insisted he was the reason tension formed, creating entire storylines that didn't exist. Reaction channels started dropping videos with titles like "YB breaks silence," even though he said nothing. Others posted fake DMs claiming Keef messaged them. It became a circus, and the craziest part was that fans didn't want the truth. They wanted entertainment. Amid all this chaos, one of Keef's longtime associates called him, sounding more concerned than angry. "Look, bro," he said, "people gonna say what they want, but if you don't say something soon, the internet gonna write the whole script." Keef rubbed the back of his neck and replied, "I ain't explaining myself to strangers. If they care, they'll call me." His associate paused. "But they not calling you, bro. They posting." That statement landed heavy. Keef sat down again, staring at the empty studio floor. He didn't want drama. He didn't want people thinking he made choices out of disloyalty. He didn't want years of mutual respect to be erased over a misunderstanding. But he also didn't want to get online and perform emotions publicly just to satisfy people who only cared when there was tension. Meanwhile, in Chicago, some OTF members started cooling off. One tweeted, "People read too deep into everything. Let artists live." Another wrote, "Fun, a convo solves more than comments." Fans noticed the shift instantly. Suddenly, the outrage slowed, replaced with curiosity, speculation, and cautious optimism. But just when things looked like they might calm down, a new clip leaked. This time, it wasn't blurry hallway footage or audio of Keef. It was a behind-the-scenes video from the studio showing Keef bobbing his head to a beat, while someone off camera laughed and said, "YB went crazy on this one." The room froze online. People lost their minds. Comment sections exploded with, "OMG, they are collabing? OTF not gonna like this. This just confirmed everything. Bro, the internet is about to implode." But here's where the real twist came in. Keef wasn't on the track. He wasn't even reacting to YB's verse. And the person off camera had been referring to an unreleased artist who just happened to have a similar flow. The reaction was completely unrelated, but the context was missing, and the internet didn't care about nuance. They wanted fire. They wanted conflict. They wanted the headline. When Keef saw that this new clip was going viral, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Here we go again." Even his engineer looked stressed. "Bro, they twisting everything." The room grew heavy. The pressure wasn't from OTF, YB, or even the industry. It was from the internet shaping something into a narrative that none of the artists involved ever co-signed. Keef finally stood, grabbed his jacket, and said quietly, "I'm done letting people tell my story. Tonight, I'm saying something for real." And that is when everything changed. That night, the energy in Atlanta felt electric. Not the good kind, the kind that builds right before a storm. Keef left the studio and stepped outside into the humid night air, the city buzzing in the background with cars, late night conversations, and the faint thump of distant speakers. He wasn't rushing, wasn't panicked, but he moved with purpose, like someone finally ready to stop letting the world twist his silence into their own entertainment. His phone buzzed non-stop in his pocket, notifications lighting up like fireworks. Tweets, tags, reactions, YouTube thumbnails with his face edited next to OTF affiliates, and captions like "beef confirmed" or "why did Keef do this?" or "YB and Keef collab inbound" flooded his screen. He shook his head as he read them, but not angry but disappointed at how fast people forget that artists are human beings, not characters in a soap opera they can script however they want. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, one of OTF's closest associates sat in a living room full of people arguing loudly about the situation. Some were saying Keef betrayed them, others were saying it was blown out of proportion, and a few insisted that Keef didn't owe anyone explanations. The room felt like a pressure cooker. At one point, someone threw their hands up and said, "This only big because the internet made it big." And the whole room fell silent because everyone knew that was the truth. None of them had talked directly to Keef, yet emotions were running high purely off assumptions, misunderstandings, and the weight of fan narratives. At the same time, Keef suddenly received a text that made him stop walking. It came from someone he hadn't spoken to in a long time. Not an OTF affiliate, but someone deep in that circle, someone whose words held real value. The message read, "If this ain't what it looks like, say something." At that exact moment, as if the universe wanted to mirror the tension, thunder rumbled in the distance. Keef didn't reply right away. He just stared at the message while standing outside his car, rain starting to fall in slow drops around him. Behind him, the studio door opened and his engineer stepped out, saying, "You heading out?" Keef nodded. "Yeah, I gotta clear the air before they clear it for me." His engineer raised an eyebrow. "You doing an IG live?" Keef shook his head. "Nah, I'm sending something direct." Meanwhile, inside OTF circles, and emotions were shifting. One member, sitting alone in his car, rewatched the earliest clip that started the entire disaster. The footage of Keef walking in a hallway. After playing it over for the 10th time, he sighed and said out loud, "This really don't prove nothing." He posted a tweet minutes later saying, "Nah, as blowing up my phone. Y'all relax." Fans immediately screenshotted it, twisting it into all kinds of meanings. Some interpreted it as peace. Others saw it as a warning, but all of them added it to the chaos. And while social media continued spiraling, Keef finally climbed into his car, closed the door, and played back a voice recording he had made earlier. It was a rough draft, just him speaking into the mic with the AC humming in the background. The recording said, "Y'all switching the story up. I ain't do nothing but walk into a building. If people got an issue, they can talk to me directly. I ain't picking sides, I'm making music." He listened to the recording twice, then whispered to himself, "Nah, that's not enough." He hit delete. He didn't want something defensive. He didn't want something emotional. He wanted something honest, something clear, something that wouldn't add fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, fans online were creating full-blown timelines, charts, and theories in real time. One TikTok investigator said, "Notice how Keef looked over his shoulder here. That means he knew the situation was messy." Another said, "If you pay attention to the background audio, you can hear someone say, 'That's Keef,' so maybe the meeting was planned." None of it was true. But millions of views poured in anyway because people love a story more than they love the truth. Back in Chicago, a small conversation was taking place in a barbershop where older heads shook their heads at the youth. "Man, social media messing up relationships left and right," one barber said. "This ain't beef, this miscommunication." And right as he said it, someone else nearby received a notification and shouted, "Yo, someone just posted a leaked screenshot from Keef's camp." People crowded around the phone. The screenshot appeared to show Keef typing a message that said, "Let's talk." Fans went crazy, thinking this meant he was reaching out to OTF. But minutes later, someone else posted the full screenshot, revealing he wasn't talking to OTF at all. He was writing to one of his producers. And the internet had taken half a sentence and built a house of lies on top of it. At that same moment, Keef sat in his car recording something new. This time his voice was quiet but firm. "I don't got no problem with nobody, and I don't move off what outsiders want. I move how I move. If you rock with me, cool. If not, cool. But don't rewrite history to fit y'all feelings." He listened back, nodded, and this time saved the file instead of deleting it. Meanwhile, in Chicago, OTF affiliates started calming down. One of them, the one who first posted the subliminal, received a call from someone older and wiser in the camp. The older voice said, "Son, don't let the internet make you emotional. You know how it go. Talk to that man before you assume anything." A long silence followed. Then the affiliate finally said, "Boyd, you right." At that same time, Keef's phone buzzed one more time. This time the message said, "If you're free tonight, we should talk. No internet, just us." Keef stared at the screen, then cracked the first real smile he'd made all day. Not a petty smile, not a triumphant one, a relieved one. Because finally, for the first time since the drama began, somebody wanted the truth instead of the story. And that's exactly when everything took its first real turn toward clarity. The night grew heavier as Keef drove across Atlanta, the streetlights flickering across his windshield like the universe was trying to signal something important was about to happen. He wasn't speeding, but there was urgency in the way he gripped the wheel, like he had finally reached a point where silence was no longer an option. But the message inviting him to talk had come from someone whose voice still mattered in the grand scheme of things. Someone who had been around long before all the internet noise, long before the labels, long before the fan bases turned everything into a spectacle. As he drove, his phone sat on the passenger seat, buzzing every few seconds with new notifications. Reaction channels were already live, some claiming OTF sunned him, others claiming he defied them, and some insisting YB orchestrated the whole thing. None of it was true, but truth didn't trend. Chaos did. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the person who sent the invitation sat alone in a quiet living room, the glow of a single lamp illuminating their face. They weren't angry. They weren't plotting. They were tired of watching a relationship formed in the early drill era get twisted into drama for people who never knew the reality. They replayed the first subliminals posted earlier that day and sighed, realizing how much of the tension came from misunderstanding, pride, and public pressure. They didn't want to argue, they wanted clarity, something rare in an industry where everything is filtered through a screen. While Keef was still on the road, OTF affiliates gathered again, but this time the energy was different. Earlier tension had simmered down into something closer to concern than conflict. One of them, the loudest earlier, sat quietly scrolling through comments calling him dramatic, childish, messy, and comments he never expected. A friend nudged him and said, "Bro, they dragging you worse than him now." That's crazy. He shook his head and muttered, "I ain't mean for it to get like this." It was the first sign that things were shifting back toward understanding instead of escalation. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Keef pulled up outside a private house. Not a mansion, not a studio, just a regular home in a quiet neighborhood. He turned off the engine, checked the save voice recording again, and slipped his phone into his pocket. When he walked up to the door, he hesitated for a second, not out of fear, but because he knew the conversation inside would be the first honest moment of the entire day. When the door opened, the man on the other side didn't say anything. He just stepped back and nodded. Keef walked inside. The room was warm, the air smelled like incense, and music played softly in the background. But the mood was serious. And they sat across from each other, a small coffee table between them, and for the first time since the drama began, there was no audience, no cameras, no memes, no reaction channels, just two people who needed to talk. The older man spoke first, his voice low and steady. "I ain't call you here for problems. I called you cause everybody got you in a story that ain't even your story." Keef leaned back and let out a long breath. "I ain't know it was gonna blow up like that." The man shook his head. "It wasn't the link up, it was the silence after. Folks felt like you left them to the internet wolves." Keef frowned slightly confused. "Bro, I ain't even know y'all was taking it like that. I was minding my business." The older man nodded. "I know, but the fans don't." There was a long pause, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken things. As Keef finally said, "You know I ain't picking no sides. I don't even think in sides no more." The man gave him a long, searching look. "So you ain't do none of that on purpose? The hallway clip, the studio energy, the timing?" Keef shook his head slowly. "I walked into a building. They turned it into a movie." The older man chuckled softly, more out of exhaustion than amusement. "The internet don't know nuance. They know drama." Keef nodded. "And they keep trying to involve y'all in something I ain't even doing." The older man leaned forward. "Then tell them, not the fans, them." Both knew who them meant. The voices that had posted subliminals, the ones who felt slighted, the ones who reacted emotionally because the internet cornered them into thinking silence equaled betrayal. Back in Chicago, and those same people were now sitting in a living room watching a video a fan had uploaded claiming that Keef unfollowed certain accounts, even though it wasn't true. "Bro, look at this BS," one of them said, tossing the phone down. "They trying to make it worse." Another replied, "You gon' talk to him?" He shrugged. "If he reaches out, yeah." At almost the exact moment he said that, Keef's phone buzzed again in Atlanta. It was another message from someone in that circle, shorter this time. "If you want to talk, I'm open." The timing felt surreal. Keef showed the message to the older man, who nodded and said, "See? Everybody just confused. That's all." Meanwhile, the internet was still deep in chaos mode. TikTok creators were uploading videos like OTF member cries on IG live after Keef's response, even though nobody cried. Twitter users posted fake quotes like, "Keef said he'd been felt betrayed," which he never said. YouTube thumbnails showed OTF members pointing angrily at Keef, even though the images were photoshopped. But the turning point came when someone leaked a voice note from an OTF affiliate saying, "I ain't got beef with that man. I was just reacting to what I saw. Miscommunication, that's all." Fans were stunned. Reaction channels stopped mid-sentence. The drama started unraveling not through louder conflict, but quieter truths slowly surfacing. Back at the house, Keef stood up and said, "I'ma reach out tonight, direct, no internet." The older man nodded with relief. "Good, cause if y'all don't talk, these fans gonna start World War IV for no reason." Keef chuckled lightly, shaking his head as he walked toward the door. "They bored, is man." "Too bored," the man replied. Outside, Keef sat in his car again. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. He opened his phone, scrolled through messages, and began typing. "Yo, let's talk. No cameras, no internet, just a conversation." He hovered over the send button for a moment, then pressed it. Not out of fear, not out of frustration, but because it was the first step toward restoring balance. Not for the public, not for the blogs, for himself, and for the people who actually mattered. And that message was about to shift the entire narrative. By the time the night finally settled and the conversations behind the scenes started moving toward real clarity, the internet was still running wild. On, completely unaware that half the drama they were arguing about had already begun to dissolve in private. Fans kept refreshing feeds, waiting for statements, waiting for someone to explode, waiting for the next clip to leak, not realizing that sometimes the biggest moments don't happen online at all. They happen in quiet rooms, late night calls, and messages sent without pressure from an audience. And that's exactly what made this entire situation so unpredictable. The world was watching a fire they helped start, but the people involved were slowly putting it out behind closed doors. Some fans were relieved, some disappointed, some confused. Emotions ran high from all sides. Reaction channels started changing their titles from "Beef Confirmed" to "Drama Cooling Down," while Twitter users debated whether the situation was ever real to begin with, or just blown out of proportion by excitement, nostalgia, and a hunger for conflict that wasn't even there. But still, there were unanswered questions. Would Keef's direct message lead to a real conversation? Would OTF respond publicly? Would YB ever speak on his side of the story? Or would he let the internet argue forever? And most importantly, would this moment shift the entire direction of the culture, or would it be remembered as just another chaotic weekend in rap history? Only time will tell, and trust, the next move could change everything. So if you're watching right now, don't go anywhere. Hit that like button so this story keeps getting pushed out. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next update, and drop a comment below letting us know what you think really happened. Was it loyalty, miscommunication, or just fans doing too much? Your opinion matters. Stay tuned.